the class. Students, we are going to start a new chapter, and the chapter is coal and petroleum. So in this chapter, what we are going to learn is the different types of resources and how they are formed, and how can we utilize them or we can use them, and what is exhaustible, inexhaustible resources. So this chapter is all about the resources. So first of all, we need to learn is what is a resource. Basically, if something is helpful to people, then it is called to be a resource. In a broad sense, resources can be places, people, or things. For example, a library is a resource center for all kinds of information. So, resource means something that is useful to us. Alright, so what is a natural resource? Natural resource is any physical item on earth that can be useful to people. Natural resources are the natural products of the land, air and sea. So you will find that in activity number 1, the two columns, natural and man-made. Isn't so? You have already learned about the man-made things and natural things in the junior sections, so that you can make a list of them. Next one is the natural resources. The things which were taken from nature and are used without any much changes. They are called the natural resources, like air, water, mineral, rocks, etc. So all of these things can be used and they have a continuous supply. The non-renewable resources. Now the other natural resources cannot replace themselves because they form over millions of years. So air, we can have a continuous supply, but some things that is non-renewable, that means we cannot renew it, or we cannot just make it by ourselves. They are called the non-renewable resources. So it means non-renewable resources which include all type of material from within the earth. So we can find them within the earth. Supplies of non-renewable resources such as metallic minerals like gold, silver, copper. We cannot make them by our own because of it took millions of years, isn't? So we cannot make them. By mining, we can get them from within the earth. There are some energy fuels as well. They are coal, oil, natural gas, and we must find a way to recycle them. Alright, so we must know how to use them in a controlled way. Next is an activity. So if you will read this activity, you will find the motto or the gist of the activity is to teach you that if we won't use the non-renewable resources in a controlled way, then one day there will be nothing left for our future generation, and must use all the resources in a controlled manner or in a controlled way. So now assume that the eatables in the container represent the total availability of an exhaustible natural resource like coal, petroleum or natural gas. If you will read that entire activity, then you will understand what is the eatables. Eatables are the popcorn, peanut and roasted gram or toffees. So they are representing the natural resources here. So each group may have different consumption pattern. That means we each have different consumption pattern. That are the earlier generation of groups too greedy. I already mentioned that we must not be greedy in order to give the future generation resources. Otherwise, it will be exhausted completely. Okay, so now you have to know that in this chapter we will learn about some exhaustible natural resources like coal, petroleum, natural gas. These were formed from dead remains of living organisms. We will learn about the fossils in the next slide. So these are all known as fossil fuel. Before moving on further, we must understand what is exhaustible natural resource. So, the exhausted means used up. That means the things which can be exhausted or used up completely, those are called the exhaustible resources. And inexhaustible means that they cannot be used up completely. That means they are limitless. Suppose the sunlight. Sunlight, they are limitless because we cannot use up all the air or all the sunlight. Can we? Of course we can. Now tell me, what do you think? Do you think that water is a renewable resource or is a non-renewable resource? What do you think? Now, let me tell you that in recent years, Chennai requires over 850 million liters of water, but the government is able to provide only 500 million liters. That means people can't have water as per their need. So now what do you think? It is a renewable resource, of course, but if we use it in a controlled way. Now look at here. Water as a renewable resource. Water can be considered a renewable material when carefully controlled usage, treatment and release are followed. If not, it would become a non-renewable resource. At that location, I have already mentioned you about the Chennai water crisis. Our groundwater level is actually limited. So, you have to think twice or thrice before wasting the water, cause it is the time to think. Resource is the source or supply from which we can benefit in some way. So, type of resource, natural resource and man-made resources, I have already mentioned. So, natural resources can be further divided into two. That is, inexhaustible natural resources and exhaustible natural resources. And we already know that what is man-made resources. A man-made resource is something made by humans for their consumption. That means for their own need. They are not available naturally. So man-made resource, of course, they are not natural. So now, inexhaustible natural resources. The resources that occur naturally and are unlimited in nature are called the inexhaustible natural resource. I have already told you about the sunlight. So next one is the resources that occur naturally but are limited in nature are called the exhaustible natural resources. These resources can get exhausted by human activities and might disappear altogether or take hundreds or thousands of years to regenerate again. For example, forest, wildlife, mineral, coal, petroleum, natural gas, etc. So, all of these things, they are exhaustible. That means they can be completely used up someday. So, we need to conserve them. Okay, because of I have already mentioned that they formed after a million of years. So we cannot make them in an instance, right? So coal, petroleum and natural gas are exhaustible natural resources. They are called the fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are fuels that are formed by fossils or the dead remains of living organisms. That means all these things formed from the dead organisms. We will learn about the process when I will tell you the story of coal. Sunlight resource, waterfall is also renewable resource, petrol, coal, LPG, these are non-renewable resource. CNG is actually the compressed natural gas, so it can be a renewable resource. Next is water fuels. So a fuel is any substance that release large amount of energy in the form of heat and light when it is burned. For example, coal and petroleum are fuel. We all know that we can get energy from coal and petroleum. That is why we use them to run the factories, and we also use them in our vehicle. Classification of fuels. So there is solid fuel, liquid fuel and gaseous fuels. And the definitions are: solid fuel is these fuels exist in a solid state at room temperature. For example, coal, firewood, charcoal, coke, etc. And liquid fuel, these are volatile liquid that produce vapor which burns and produces energy. The petrol, diesel, kerosene. Alright, they are all in liquid form, so they are the liquid fuels. Next is gaseous fuels. These are the fuels that exist in the form of gas or as a mixture of different gaseous fuels. So for example, the natural gas, CNG, I told you, the full form of CNG is compressed natural gas. Okay, remember it. Next is fossil fuel. It is formed when dead plants and animals got buried under earth over millions of years ago, and due to high pressure and temperature they got transformed into fossil fuel, and they are all non-renewable resource, so their wise use is recommended. Don't waste non-renewable resource as they take much time to get renewed. So what is coal? Coal is a sedimentary rock. Why we are calling coal a sedimentary rock? Because sedimentation is a process. Suppose you have taken one test tube and fill it with water and pour sand into it. The sand will settle down, isn't? That is called the sedimentation process. Alright, so we will learn that after years of sedimentation process, coal actually formed from the dead organisms. That is why it is called the sedimentary rock. It mainly contains carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. It also has some quantity of nitrogen and sulfur. So coal is a fossil fuel that is formed from the dead plant and matter over millions of years due to heat and pressure. We have already learned the definition of fossil fuel. What is the story of coal? About 300 million years ago, the earth had dense forest in low-lying wetland area. Due to natural processes like flooding, this forest got buried under the soil. As more soil deposited over them, they were compressed by the pressure. Temperature also rose as they sunk deeper and deeper. Under high pressure and high temperature, dead plants got slowly converted to coal. As coal contains mainly carbon, the slow process of conversion of dead vegetation into coal is also called the carbonization. Since it was formed from the remains of vegetation, coal is also called a fossil fuel. So next one is, look at this picture, that there was swamp 300 million years ago. Then what happened? Both the dinosaur, many giant plants died in the swamps. Then water over 100 million years ago, they also deposited the dirt over the dead plant and organism. Then what happened? The heat and pressure, the rock and the dirt along with the dead organism, both of them become compressed and they form the coal. Alright. Next is different types of coal. Now look at here. As coal get older, the carbon content in it is higher. When coal is burned, it produces carbon dioxide. So different type of coal is peat, lignite, bituminous, steam coal, anthracite and graphite. Alright, in your book it is not mentioned that type of coal, but read it once for your knowledge. Major coal products. So they are coke, coal tar and coal gas. Today we will learn about them in details. So this is all for today. Thank you, students.